Every married couple eventually has conflict. Unfortunately, for many couples, conflict has them. In tonight's episode, we'll continue to provide tips for how to manage conflict in marriage. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Welcome to Living a Godly Marriage. I am Voncille Green.
And I'm Melvin Green. And tonight we continue talking about this challenging subject for couples, how to manage conflict in marriage. And why do you think it's so challenging for couples, Voncille?
Well, if you think about scripture, if you go back to Genesis, there was conflict from the very beginning.
Yes.
With Adam and Eve and the snake in the garden. Right?
That's right.
So
that's right.
Conflict was from the beginning. That's not anything that's new.
Right. And you mentioned Satan, and of course, Satan's plan is to divide a household, divide a couple, and it's not just because of the couple, it's also because marriage was God's first institution. So whatever the devil can do to create strife, conflict, and as scripture says, a house divided shall fall. Definitely. So in our last episode, we started talking about managing conflict in marriage. And so what we'll do is just review quickly a couple of things, and then we'll move on. First, conflict is
a serious disagreement between two people involving issues and feelings.
And both of those are important, both issues and feelings. Also, how you handle conflict in marriage reveals your willingness to obey God
and your willingness to sacrificially love your spouse.
And notice that word, sacrificially. And finally, how you manage conflict in marriage also reveals your level of maturity. And go ahead,
I'm sorry, excuse me. And this is backed up in scripture in Mark 12, 30, 31. It reads, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and with all your strength. The second is this, love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these. And if I may say, when we think about neighbors, we think about those who live next door. But actually, our closest neighbor is our spouse, the person that lives in the house or the people that lives in the house with us. They're our neighbors as well.
So your spouse is your closest neighbor. That's so true. That's so true, Voncille. And so when we're talking about managing conflict, we're learning how to live with our closest neighbor and how to deal and manage and resolve conflict that inevitably will come up.
Yes.
So let's continue reviewing from the last episode.
Okay.
So we talked about that your spouse has a love account, and we said you have a responsibility to help manage your spouse's love account. And so in that love account, you can make two transactions, which are
deposits and withdrawals.
That's right. And just like a bank account, the key there is you have to
make sure you have a positive balance.
That's right.
In your account.
That's right, because that makes it easier to manage and deal with the conflict if you've got a positive balance in the account. So tonight we'll take a look and let's start discussing, and we're going to be commenting as we go along. We'll start with what are causes of marital conflict. And I'm sure immediately a lot of causes come to mind, but let's take a look at a few.
Conflicts occur when we have different opinions about particular issues.
Yes, and that's not unusual. It's easy to have different opinions.
Or different values or beliefs.
Yes.
That's why it's so important before you get married to discuss your values and beliefs.
And this is also why God says in his word that we are to make sure we marry a fellow Christian, a fellow believer, because if you have different values or beliefs, it's going to become really challenging. For example, how do you raise the children? What do you train them to believe? Other causes of marital conflict are
different preferences.
And what's an example of that?
Well, I like Pepsi and you love Coke, but that's just a minor thing.
Yeah.
But honestly, the little things can sometimes grow into
big things,
big problems.
Yes. That's right. And there are big preferences as well. For example, in many marriages, one person's a spender and the other's a
saver. That's
right. So in managing the money, the spender wants to spend, and the saver
stingy wants to save.
Not stingy or frugal, but
a saver.
That's right. You want to save, thinking ahead to the future. And that's just a different preference. Mm-hmm. So notice one thing about preferences is not right or wrong. It's just my preference, what I prefer to do.
And again, it's always a good thing before you get married to discuss your preferences with your future spouse.
That's right. That's right. Okay, another cause of marital conflict are different points of view. Mm-hmm. Just as a couple, for example, a husband and wife are wired differently. Mm-hmm. And so a man, for example, what's a difference how we're wired differently?
Well, I've heard people say that women are more sensitive than men are. And I don't know if that's true or not, but we do have fragile feelings. But men do too, but they won't show theirs as much.
Okay. Yes, men and women are wired differently. And so they have different needs and they have different preferences. Right. And so that's not unusual, but those needs and preferences can cause big conflict in marriage. And then another is different expectations or assumptions. For example, when you get married, what are your expectations that your husband or your wife is going to do in work around the house, for example, or different assumptions? Well, I assume you'll work 2 or 3 jobs to take care of us. I mean, see, and that can cause conflict.
Right. Mm-hmm. Or if I can make this personal, when you and I first got married, in the morning, I wanted quiet. My husband is very noisy in the morning. He wants to turn the TV on or read or listen to the radio or something, music, but I like it quiet, completely quiet.
Yes, now I resemble that remark.
Yes, you did.
Yes, you want it to be quiet. I didn't know I was noisy, but that's true. That's true. And so that even goes in when we're having devotions. Because we can do it together, but then Voncille wants to spend quiet time with the Lord. Yes.
And that's very important for wives. Make sure you have, and I enjoy doing devotions with you. I don't want to, anyone to misunderstand it. I enjoy doing devotions with you, but for me, it's important for me to have my quiet time.
Yes.
And that's part of my language, love language. You know, I like quiet time. We're different that way.
Right. So we're wired differently, and again, that can be a point of contention, but we've learned to deal with that. Right. Another is
not apologizing or unforgiveness for past offenses. And I've shared this with people in the past.
Mm-hmm.
In my first marriage, if I may say, I would very seldom apologize for anything, even though clearly there were times looking back, I was wrong about a few things, not a lot, but a few things, important things I was wrong, but I would very seldom apologize. And I've shared this before with my husband now. He's taught me how to apologize. He's even though I don't do that many things wrong, but
that's right.
but I will apologize.
Yeah, and that's so important. Apologizing, admitting that you hurt someone or that you wronged someone or offended someone. But the other side of that coin, Voncille, is forgiving. So
yes.
if a person does apologize, we need to forgive them, just like the Lord forgives us.
And if I may share, that is another thing I've learned from you, to just let it go. There was a song, Let It Go, Let It Go.
Yes.
And I've shared this before, I could hang on to a thing and just hang on to it and drag it through the mud.
Right. Yes. Okay. Well, thank you. Let's continue and looking at this as we finish up the causes of marital conflict. Different conflict styles or personalities. Some people's style is to win every argument or disagreement. Another person's style could be to let the person win and not really speak up. So different styles and opposites attract a lot of times in marriage.
But it's important, and something I've learned, and I always think about my mother, about holding things in. If you're angry about something, the analogy she used is like carrying around a sack of potatoes. And if you carry them around and you don't do anything with them, what's going to happen to them? Yeah,
they're going to get rotten, and it's going to spoil a relationship and stink up a marriage as well.
Exactly.
Yeah, good point. So let's continue and let's talk about wrong motives and objectives in conflict. And this can happen to either a husband or a wife or even both of them. So what are they?
To win the conflict and get what you want.
Oh,
you want
boy.
Your way.
Yes.
It's either my way or the highway.
That's right. Have it my way. But that's a wrong objective, to try to win every disagreement or argument. Secondly, a wrong objective is to try to change your spouse. Oh my gosh, if I could just change him or change her, that's a wrong objective.
Right. And if I could say, that's why it's so important to do premarital counseling before you get married.
Right, to discuss how you're going to deal with conflict.
Because chances are, if a person is not willing to change once you get married, it's going to escalate and get worse.
That's right. Another wrong objective in any conflict is to intimidate your spouse into submission. Now, you're going to do it my way, or any way of intimidation.
I'm not cooking for you because you can't cook. You have to go out and buy yourself something. I'm not cooking for you.
And another is to prove your spouse is wrong. Yeah. That's a terrible objective. I'm going to prove that you're wrong. That's kind of a selfish objective as well.
Someone told me once, I thought it's sage advice, do you want to be right or do you want peace in your life?
Oh, that's good. That's good. Another wrong objective in conflict is to punish or get back at your spouse. And sometimes that happens. But that's a wrong objective. Another is to
make your spouse feel guilty or ashamed, and to keep bringing up a past.
Yes. And that's a wrong objective. You can't really resolve conflict with these objectives. And finally, to avoid the issue, I don't want to talk about it, or dismiss how your spouse feels or how you feel. You shouldn't feel that way. Yes. So these are wrong objectives in conflict, And unfortunately, when they happen between a couple, in fact, before we leave this slide, let me just ask you, which of these wrong objectives do you have a lot when it comes to conflict? And also, what would your spouse say? Which of these wrong objectives show up a lot when you have conflict with them?
And if I may say, and you may talk about this later, it's important if you're having a conflict with your spouse to be very clear about what it is that's upsetting you or that you disagreed with. Because as you say often, if I don't communicate with you, you will fill in the blanks and you could be completely wrong, go off the rails. And that's not what I mean at all.
And if you're not communicating, then I just have to improve my mind reading skills.
Exactly. Yes.
That's what
if I may share also, I've never really learned how to argue. I can express my point of view, but sometimes I get frustrated when I'm trying to express my point of view. But it's always a good idea. I'm a better writer than I am a communicator. Would you agree with that, honey?
Yes. Yeah.
And so I will write down what's troubling me and present it to my husband.
Right. Which is another approach that we're going to talk about. All right. Thank you, dear.
You're welcome.
Okay, so let's continue. What happens when a couple has the wrong objectives in conflict? What do we see here, Voncille?
Well, they both turn their backs on each other, so they're not communicating at all. It's clearly frustrated. You see that her arms are crossed, like, and he is like, "What's wrong with her? She's crazy." That's what he's thinking.
We're not getting anywhere.
Lost her mind.
Are they resolving the conflict?
No, they're not resolving.
No,
because there's no communication at all.
Right, and things are getting worse, definitely.
Right. Yes.
So let's take a look at what happens with a couple has right objectives in conflict, and what are those right objectives? So let's take a look at them.
To respect and understand your spouse. And as my husband says, you don't have to agree necessarily with what I'm saying, but respect that I have the right to my opinion. And
that's so important, is that as I enter conflict, there should always be a respect. And my goal, my objective is to try to understand. Okay, try to understand your point of view, not judge it, not criticize it, but to understand it. Doesn't mean I have to agree with it, but my right objective is to try to understand it. Another right objective is to
identify and address the issue.
Yeah, what's really the issue? And we'll talk more about how to do that.
And to look for a win-win outcome.
And that's certainly better than traditionally when couples have conflict, they approach it with a win
and you lose, but
or win-lose attitude. But why not approach it with the right objective of, let's try to find a win-win that we both feel comfortable, satisfied, and even happy with. And that can be done, and we'll provide tips on how to do that. And another is a right objective.
To accept and value different views. And my husband, I may not agree with anything that you say, but you have a right to your opinion. And
that's right. And I need to see the value in your different point of view. And I think that's so important because in God's eye, the two have become one. So you can have a valuable viewpoint to the discussion that I may not see. Also, another right objective is to
apologize and forgive your spouse. And this is something that I've learned from you.
Yes, and that's two sides of the same coin. If I'm wrong, I need to apologize. And once I do apologize, you need to
accept and forgive.
That's right.
Your apology.
That's right. And those are both right objectives. Another right objective in conflict
is to work until the conflict is resolved or an agreement is reached.
Yes, two different things. We can discuss maybe we won't resolve the conflict, but we can reach an agreement. Really important. I mean, we could reach an agreement or understanding, or some people call it a truth. No, we can reach an understanding. You know, we may discuss this subject, but we're just not going to agree on it, or we'll reach an understanding. If you have an issue with someone in my family, they offended you or whatever, then the understanding is I will talk with them. You will tell me, and I will talk to them, and vice versa as well. So that's kind of an understanding or an agreement that is reached. Another right objective is to have both of us feel good about the outcome.
It's a win-win.
Yes. And that means we need to check with each other and, you know, how you feeling about this? Okay. But jumping back to number 6, also, I think it's important to write objective that you're going to keep working to resolve the issues. Again, you're not going to ignore it. You're not going to deny it. You're not going to, you know, be afraid to discuss it, but you're going to really work at it.
To resolve it.
Work at it to resolve. All right, so what happens when a couple has the right objectives in conflict? What do you see here, Voncille?
They're staring in each other's eyes lovingly.
Right. And how do you think they're feeling?
I think they're feeling respected, and that's so important, that the point of view has been heard.
Right.
Yes.
Right. And how do you feel? How does a couple feel when they have worked through conflict or reached an agreement or understanding?
Valued.
Yeah, you feel valued. Feel like we're partners. And I'm glad we've worked through this. Now we can continue to move forward.
So another conflict. Sorry.
Right. Okay, let's continue. All right.
It's good to have a sense of humor about some of these things, because it can get to be pretty
intense.
So
and challenging. Definitely.
Sense of humor is a good thing.
Right. The worst times to deal with marital conflict. This is so important because there are times where bringing up issues, trying to resolve them, shouldn't really do it. So let's get into it.
So when you're angry, it's not a good time to bring up.
Yes, especially if I'm very angry, definitely. And
when you're tired.
Oh boy, we both had a long work day and we're tired, or the kids have kept us up and we're tired. That's not the time to deal with conflict. And another,
when you're lonely.
Yeah, that can be a problem as well.
And just before going to work.
Oh my gosh, can you imagine? What's the problem with that? Having conflict right before you leave to go to work.
Take it out on everybody that I come in contact with.
Yeah, and how do you feel when you get to work?
Angry.
Yeah, I mean, are you ready to really put your best at it?
No, I'm not. Are you?
Because what's your mind thinking about?
I'm thinking of how ticked off I am about something you said or something you did.
That's right.
And a good acronym I read once, and I don't know if you want to cover this.
Yeah, go ahead.
HALT. HALT. Be careful when you're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired.
That's
Try
right.
to avoid
having conflict.
Then.
Yes, that's good.
Someplace HALT.
Yes, that's good.
It's a good acronym to think about.
That's right. Definitely. And so other times to deal with marital conflict the worst time is
just after getting home from work.
Yeah.
And my husband, well, we're both retired now, but I retired before my husband. So when he would come home from work, I would be very careful not to meet him at the door with something that I was unhappy about.
Yeah. And also I remember sharing with you at times that, rush hour was rough or the workday was rough, and I needed just give me a few minutes to calm down, cool down. Definitely.
chill just a little bit.
What other worst times to deal with marital conflict?
Right before going to bed.
Oh,
That is
boy.
the worst time.
Yes, that's not going to make. And this is why at times couples go to bed and it's like a brick wall is between them.
And if I may share, when Mel and I went through when we went through our counseling before married, the counselor said to us never to go to, that we should not go to bed angry. I wanted to know what that meant to us. And I said, sometimes that means that I won't go to sleep. Don't go to sleep. Because for me, if I could be completely transparent, it takes me a while. If I'm really angry about something, it takes me a while to calm down, to let it go.
That's right.
And again, if I may share, that's another thing I've learned from you, my darling husband, is to let a thing go. Because like I said earlier, and I know I've repeated this, but it's important. I would hang on to a thing and I would just drag a person through the mud. So it's good to let it go.
Right.
Just let it go. Okay,
let's finish these examples. Thank you. When you're hungry, that's a bad time. Also a bad time is... This is a really bad time. It's in front of your family members, especially your children, your kids, or friends. And that really makes everybody uncomfortable.
Yes.
Also...
in public, especially in church.
Yeah, that's a bad testimony there. And finally...
well, in the car.
Oh, yeah.
That's really bad because you don't want to get distracted in the car.
Right. And
not in that way.
Right. So, I mean, so all of these are important. So we've talked about times that we can we should avoid conflict, avoid having discussions and trying to resolve conflict. Okay. And so in this session, we've talked about there are many causes of marital conflicts, and we've said there are wrong objectives. And if I approach a marriage with the wrong objective, or if both partners have the wrong objective, I'm gonna win this argument, or I'm gonna change them, or what's another wrong objective? I'm gonna get even with them. Yeah, see, those wrong objectives just gonna escalate the conflict.
If I could use an example, I do the cooking in our home. Bill takes me out to dinner and I like that. But if I'm upset with him and I think I'm going to give back at him and add extra salt to his food, that's terrible. Not that I would do that, and I've never done that.
No, you haven't. But I mean, couples, there are a variety of people upset and the emotions, because let me tell you what happens. They replay the argument or disagreement in their head, and they zoom in on what their spouse said, did, or their attitude, and they replay it over and over, and they stay upset.
Yes.
Yeah, sometimes you go to bed like that and you wake up and you're angry and upset.
And that's what if I may go back to this again, what my mother said about it's like carrying around a sack of potatoes. That eventually they're going to rot. And
that's right.
If you keep holding on to anger and resentment and all of that, it's going to sour relationship.
Okay, so we provided some tips talking about, again, this fascinating subject that every couple has to learn to deal with, how to manage conflict in marriage. And so in our next episode, we'll continue to discuss this vital issue in marriage. So, as we always like to close, Voncille, living a godly marriage is the best marriage. So long.
Thank you for joining us.
My biggest fear in the middle of my addiction was that I would never be able to get over it and that my kids wouldn't have a father. I started thinking, you know what? This isn't my story. For the longest time, fear held me back from ultimately being who I wanted to. I had to become a better man to be a better father. It's important to me that my kids are empowered and truly believe that if they can think it, they can do it.